Alright, Lego here in the flesh again to try another commentary video just to see how it goes. This piece was made rather hastily when an idea suddenly came to me late at night, and it's not too complicated. The main bulk of this piece was actually making the background that you see here, tracing the image from a sort of ish high-res resolution one I found. But the details aren't really important here. It's the color spectrum. It's the sort of the feeling of that scene, the field and the sunset with them sitting in the foreground. So I start, as you can tell there, I started by making the trace and then getting rid of a lot of the extra nuances to keep it simpler. 4 5 colors, and then I tried to get back some of the detail for the people and in the with the tractor there, Ellie and JJ sitting there. So what I did was, after making this background, I made a more precise trace of them to maintain the original, I think it was 12 or 18 colors present in that trace, to sort of make them stand out a bit just by being more nuanced than the background. So that took up, I want to say, about half the time tracing, just because I wanted to get it more precise. You can tell that I cleaned that up a bit and made a one-to-one silhouette. First I just tried making a rough run, but it didn't really turn out the way I really wanted it. It still wasn't good enough. So I just had to bite the bullet and make a precise tracing, or at least as precise as necessary. And the way you make tracings in Inkscape, you can't just Photoshop magic wand, get the outline and just magic remove background stuff. You have to sit and trace it, because this is not, Inkscape is not made for this, frankly. But when your tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So this is what I do whenever I need tracings. It's not worth it for me to use another program. I use it very rarely, so this works out pretty nice. So tracing all the holes and the outline, and then just making those holes. So I have a complete, silhouette of what I want to crop out, and then I will preserve all the original trace layers in that one silhouette. So I'm getting rid of everything that sticks out, and then when I'm left with the original set of colors for them. So it's very subtle, but if you look closely, you can tell that there's more nuances, more different colors present in on the characters and the tractor than there is on the background, which is how I wanted it to be. So they very subtly stick out a bit, by being more detailed. So at this point, I've stripped out too many colors, so I'm making one layer for the contrast, and I'm just making that one a little lighter, and I'm making use of controls in the gradients to give it a bit of a gradient there, which looks pretty nice. It's pretty subtle as well, but you can see there I'm using a mesh gradient to really control better how it turns out in the brown area. So I can control, it's more dark to the left, for example. But I'm happy with that, and it's time to actually make some words. So I decided for this project, what I really wanted was something a little bit more obscure, something a little less well known, not unknown by any means, but it's a little less used. So I decided to make this in the CC Gallifreyan system. And you can tell I need, I'm not fluent in this, so I need a little guide there on the left. Oh, sorry, right. So diligent viewers can actually decipher this as I go along. I'm not going to reveal the quote, actually. People who know. If you know where this is from, then you have a pretty good idea of what is being said here. But you can absolutely decipher this if you want. But I'm using CC, So that means I can, in this case, I'm writing every single word in its own circle. So that gives me pretty much everything I need to do when I need to plan it. Um, just make the circles approximately the size I think they're going to be, and then just place them relative to each other in a way that gives me an idea of how much it's going to take up. And then it's just about writing it one letter at a time. There's no interlocking between different words. There's no um, complex relationships between different words. There is the occasional piece of punctuation, as seen on the right there, but overall it's very individual words, very individual letters. It can be that multiple circles make up one word, but for this I've wanted every single word to be within one circle. So some of the circles, as you can see here, this is probably the biggest one. It's a bit rough, making everything fit, but I wanted it to be one circle. So that's the way it is. This entire um, Gallifreyan system, in particular, um, is very concentric oriented. So I mean, it's very apt in this case. So I'm just moving along here, letter for letter. There's not a lot of variation with each letter. Every letter has a set of identifiers it needs to have, and there's not a lot of different ways you can play with them. So a lot of letters look alike, and a lot of the same letters, like an E will always look like an E. There's not a lot of variation you can do with it, but the little you can play with it is in how much overlap you have between small and big circles, and it's going to be easier to look at. It's going to be more pronounced when I make some modifications later, but now I'm just writing it, and I can play with a little bit of the sizes later. But overall, it's a pretty easy system to work with, because every word is either concentric or it'll be overlapping concentric circles. So you can pretty much plan the whole thing from the start, because it's just the outer circles that determine how much it takes up. On the same note, it's not for everyone, because it can also become too much. Really long quotes I don't think would look very good in CC, because if you just take a step back and look at a big quote made in this manner, everything will just look alike. There won't be any variations. There won't be any like everything will just sort of melt together and be indistinguishable from one another. But for shorter words, shorter letters, and shorter sentences like this, I think it works pretty well. It's not quite dissimilar to if you like Doctor's Cut, then this is probably up your alley as well. But it's not API based, so no, sorry, IPA based. So it leaves you more freedom to write the exact text you actually want to make. Oh, and yeah, of course, another thing is writing longer pieces in this script is tedious, very tedious for the person writing as well, because I have to constantly count circles and figure out what letter am I on, what dot does this belong to, and most importantly of all, and most annoyingly at all, where do I need to cut the straight lines? Because the straight lines never go through. Like, if some letter interrupts the lines because they don't need it, some lines need them, some lines don't, some letters don't. And I need to cut the lines appropriately so that the letters that need lines have them, but ones that don't have them. And it's very annoying, very tedious. If there's any mistakes in this, and there shouldn't be, but you know, sometimes we miss stuff. if there is any mistakes in this, it's very likely a letter that needs lines that don't have them, or a letter that don't need lines but have them. That's very likely the culprit if there's any mistakes in this, because it is very tedious to keep track of what needs to have a line and what doesn't. Let's see, what else can we talk about? The different kinds of decorations you can make with this are very limited. You have the identifiers for the different letters, which is just rings and dots. And by the nature of this script, you don't have a lot of space to place these in. So you are either left with a script with just small dots everywhere and rings, or you're gonna have to get creative with how you overlap those. I decided to get a little bit creative because it was just too dull to just look at a bunch of small rings and dots spread all over. And the script allows for dots and rings overlapping different, multiple concentric circles at once, while still belonging to one only. A little bit like circles has improved the Sherman number system in that you can overlap some of the rings in that system as well, without it messing everything up. But for this, you can tell a few of the letters I made so far, they were marked in red, and they were marked in red because I needed to I needed to remember that I have to make these overlap. So I just marked some in red that I need to pay attention to make them all work out. So at this point, I've written my text and I have everything I need. I just need to arrange it in a way that makes sense to read, but also like looks good. So this script, there's no the best way to describe it is you read it from left to right, and then from from outer to inner. So I'm arranging them so that it flows in a way from left to right. That makes sense to me. And connecting up some punctuation and doing some scaling. It's not quite flowing from one way to from left to right, but it's close enough that I can live with it. And at this point, I'm just making a couple of backups because now I'm going to, as you can see there, I'm trying to make some variations in how I present the dots and the rings, just because it was too boring, frankly. So just a bit of that. There's no proofreading, at least not for this piece, because the easiest way for me to do this is actually to proofread as I go along, because once the letter is written, I shouldn't have to read that letter again, because no external influences happen for the different letters after they're done. So as long as I don't mess anything up at this point, there's no need to, in theory, proofread anything, because I've already set the amount of lines and dots and rings I need. So if it checks out once, it should check out twice. All right. So far so good. I'm just making some subtle adjustments, trying to see if I can make the flow of the reading order a little bit better. But at this point, I'm happy with what I see, and I'm just converting it all into paths so I can do some coloring. It's not, I don't have a good idea of what I want at this point, but I just wanted something that sort of blended in with the sunset. So some people might argue this is going to be hard to read, but I'm trying my best to offset that by making some shadows so that I have some contrast. So even if it takes on the coloring of the sunset, it still shouldn't it still should be readable, especially if you zoom a little bit in. Um, so I'm just doing some vaguely sunset coloring, trying to work off of some of the colors that are already there, because it's meant to blend in. It's meant to blend in. Nothing is meant to stand out about the text as such. I briefly toyed with the idea of making a watermark on this. I don't usually do that, but in this case I thought maybe, but I just decided not to. It didn't really fit in. And at the last second here, I decided to try something new, making a glare thing effect to sort of lead the reader to the start of the sentence. So a subtle like way of trying to make the reader start right there. Um, and also in a way that wouldn't really interfere with the picture you're seeing. It wouldn't be out of place to see a glare in this picture. So I decided to look at one and just try and like do some of the same colors, and then at the end of it, I'm actually pretty happy with the result. Just used a guideline there to make it a straight line, then put a bunch of bubbles on, made them halfway transparent, and then made some gradient transparency on it, and just sprinkled in a few more there. Uh, I'm actually quite happy. If you didn't know that it wasn't there, I think most people wouldn't think about it. So I'm pretty happy with this. I'm actually very happy with this. So I think I'll leave it here. Thanks for watching.